Are you ready to take the first step to embrace the unknown and step out of your comfort zone? Welcome to Step Out, Step In, the podcast that inspires you to break free from your familiar to explore the extraordinary. Hello, this is your host, David Jill. Every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, join me as we dive headfirst into thrilling stories of personal growth, daring adventures, and transformative experiences. Get ready to be motivated, inspired, and empowered to live your life to the fullest. So mark your calendar, set your alarm, and get ready to step out, step in with me every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't miss out on the adventure of a lifetime. Subscribe now, and let's step into the unknown together. This is Step Out, Step In. The journey begins here. Step Out, Step In podcast, live on Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Subscribe today. Hello and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Step Out, Step In podcast, where we explore personal growth, we explore faith, and the art of stepping out of faith into that fullness of what God has made you and what life has to offer. And I want to welcome you again tonight. It's such a wonderful and amazing time, and I want to thank you for allowing me into your homes, your cars, wherever you're listening to or watching this from, or might be watching the replay. I'm your host, David Joe, and today we're diving into power limits. And, we'll have a moment to where we feel like you've hit your maximum. But just as we get into it, I want you to share with somebody. Don't forget to comment. I like to read your comments, and let's invite one another. So, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube page, please do so. Follow me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Share, comment, share, and let's comment. All right, so we are diving into this topic, stretching beyond your limit. And as I was saying earlier, sometimes we all get into the moment where we feel that we've hit our maximum capacity, where our weight of life challenges seems too heavy. Sometimes it's overwhelming. We think that, oh, this is too much for me, and the path forward looks uncertain. And as we get into this, I just wanted to participate and let's do this together. Um, so tonight we want to get into looking at stretching yourself beyond your limits. But what if I told you that it is in these moments of limitations that we find our greatest potential? Sometimes your potential lies in where you think you're limited. So let's journey together as we explore what it means to stretch beyond your limits and discover some scriptural truths. You know, as a person of faith, I want to back it up with some scriptures, and that empowers you and I to do so. So find yourself at a comfortable place, get your beverage, your drink, um, and let's dive into this together. All right, so again, welcome to episode 74 of my Step Out, Step In podcast, Stretching Beyond Your Limits. And thank you for joining me tonight. If you just joined me, please share the link. And let's do this together. All right, so I said we want to look at a few things, how we can dive into this and stretching ourselves beyond our limits. You know, sometimes we feel that we're so limited, but the God who made you, called you, is an unlimited God. And so to understand this, let's get into understanding limits. Let's get into understanding limits. So that is number one. Now, what is limits or what is limitations? And I said limits is we place on ourselves. These are boundaries we place on ourselves, whether it is physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. You know, every one of us, every now and then, we place these limitations on ourselves, either physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, yes. And they can be influenced by our, number one, we look at our environment. It can be influenced by our environment. It can be influenced by our experiences, by our associations, by our fears, or even our comfort zone. And often these limits serve as a protection mechanism, and it shields you and I from our potential and potential failures and disappointments. But while we look at this, um, you know, we can keep, you know, limits can keep us safe. It's just like being in your comfort zone. It can keep you safe, but they can also prevent you from experiencing the fullness of life that God intends for you. When you allow your fears and uncertainties to dictate to your actions, you may find yourself stuck in a place, or you may find yourself stuck in a place of mediocrity, never realizing your potential that lies just beyond your perceived boundaries. And I want us to look at a few scriptures as well. When we look at Philippians chapter 4, In Philippians chapter 4 and the verse 13, Paul said something to the church of Philippi. He said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In other words, he was saying that as long as what I'm doing is lawful, it is legal, it is ethical, it is legitimate or legit, it is authorized, it is upright and righteous, you name it. It says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know, this verse is so powerful, and it reminds us that with Christ, our perceived limits are merely stepping stone to greater heights and achievements. Paul said, I depend on Christ, and because I depend on him, I can do all things. Because he's the one who strengthens me. He's the one who pushes me beyond my limits. He's the one who encourages me to go beyond where I think I can go anymore. You know. So in understanding your limits, we have to understand, because anything you do without the understanding, you don't place a value on it, or you do it anyhow. So once you understand what your limitations are, once you understand your limits, you can go beyond that, and you can push yourself beyond that as you depend on Christ. Number two is, let's look at a few biblical examples of stretching beyond our limits. You know, when we read the scriptures as a person of faith, you know, the Bible is filled with stories of individuals who stretched themselves beyond their limits. They stepped out in faith and out of faith to achieve what seemed impossible. Let's take, for instance, Moses. You know, in Exodus chapter 4, Moses encounters God at a burning bush. And this is somebody who had fled Egypt because he murdered an Egyptian who was mistreating a Jew. And God encountered him in the wilderness. And when God called him, he led him. When God called him to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, Moses felt unqualified, and he looked at his limitations, and he started telling God about his lack of eloquence and all that. You know, I cannot. But sometimes we forget the one who made us, the one who created us. He knows us more than we know ourselves. You know, every manufacturer knows their product very well. So Moses started giving all kinds of excuses, and sometimes we find ourselves at a place of what my bishop says, we suffer from excusitis, you know. And so next time I'll use it as my own. You know, he was giving all kinds of excuses, telling God about his limitations, that I cannot do this, I can go, you know, I can speak and all that. When we look at Exodus chapter 4 and verse 10, Exodus 4 and verse 10, and it says that it says that let's see, it says, "Oh Lord, I am not eloquent." You know, he was telling God that he's not eloquent. He says, "Oh Lord, I am not eloquent, but I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue." But listen to what God tells him in verse 11 and 12. It says, "So the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth."
and teach you what you shall say. Isn't that so amazing and so powerful? He was trying to disqualify himself from the assignment that God had for him. He was trying to limit himself, and that is where sometimes we all find ourselves. We limit ourselves. We look at sometimes our geographical locations. We look at our environment. We look at the color of our skin, our accent, and all that, and we place a limitation on ourselves. You know, sometimes I get confused because when you look at the life of Moses in Acts chapter 7 and verse 22, the Bible says that Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. That means that he was so eloquent. I mean, he was somebody who could speak, powerful in speech. Now, when God calls him, now he's telling God that, I can speak, but this is somebody who was educated. He was a learned person, and he was so powerful in speech, but was trying to place a limitation on himself. Yes, it might be that he might have a speech impairment, disability, but this is somebody the Bible describes as eloquent, powerful in speech. So sometimes when God gives an assignment, we try to limit ourselves. We place a limitation on us. We allow others to also place a limitation on us. So Moses had to stretch himself beyond his self-imposed limits. He had to stretch himself beyond his self-imposed limits. And you and I will also have to stretch ourselves beyond our self-imposed limits. And we have to shift to get into the place of trusting God and that he would equip us for the task. Just as Moses trusted God that he will equip him for that task. And as you read through the scriptures, indeed, yes, Moses became one of the greatest leaders in biblical history, guiding the children of Israel through the wilderness and towards the promised land, the promised land where he himself did not set foot on. Let's look at another character in the Bible called David. And we all know, I believe most of us know the story about David and Goliath in 1 Samuel 17 when we read the scripture. David was a young shepherd boy. He wasn't a trained warrior, but he was skillful in what he did, skillful in playing the harp, skillful in using the sling. But he wasn't a trained warrior. Yet he faced, he came face to face with a national challenge, a giant, a warrior. And when David encountered him, he stretched himself beyond the limits, trusting God and his power rather than trusting and depending on his own. So with a sling and a stone, he selected 5 stones, but he didn't get to use all 5. But one stone, with a sling and a stone, he defeated that national challenge, that giant, that warrior, proving that our limits are not a match for God's strength. And when we look at all these stories, I believe that they remind us that when we stop and when we step out in faith, God meets us where we are equipped, and he equips you and I to go beyond what our thoughts are or what we thought was impossible. So let's step out of faith. So as a number one, we have to understand our limits or our limitations. Once you understand it, we can stretch ourselves beyond it, not allowing to keep us in our comfort zone, in our tracks. Number 2 is looking at some biblical examples depending on them. We looked at Moses, we looked at David. There are many more that we could have looked at, but because of time. Another person we can also look at is Gideon. Gideon despised himself. He said, I'm the least of my tribe and all that. But God had chosen him. In fact, when God called him, he was in a wine press threshing wheat. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time doing the wrong thing. But God saw within him, I mean, a mighty man of valor. But he had already disqualified himself from that assignment. All right, so number 3 is, let's look at some practical steps to stretch beyond our limits. So how do we practically stretch ourselves beyond our limits on a daily basis? And let's look at a few. Let's look at a few steps as to how we can do this. Number 1 is acknowledge your limits. Don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, we all have limitations. And it is important to first and foremost recognize and acknowledge where you feel limited. You know, you cannot change something you don't know. And once you're able to identify, once you're able to recognize and acknowledge that this is my limitation, that is the first step to which you can make changes to it. So acknowledge it. And this could be in your career, it could be in your relationships, it could be in your spiritual life, it could be in your personal development, you know. So identifying these areas allows you to focus your efforts and prayers on them. So acknowledge your limits. And number 2 is, what is, okay. Number 2 is seek God's guidance. Seek God's guidance. You know, Proverbs 3 and the verse 5 and 6 tells us that we have to trust in the Lord with all our hearts and not lean on our own understanding, but in all our ways we should acknowledge him. Not in some of your ways, but in all your ways acknowledge him. You know, sometimes as people of God, we tend to pick and choose what we want to give to God. But he says, in all your ways, in all our ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. All your ways. And the last time I checked the meaning of all means, and it meant all. Everything, you know. So before attempting to stretch beyond your limits, seek God's guidance, ladies and gentlemen. Ask him to reveal his plans for you and to give you the strength and wisdom needed to move forward. You know, the journey might not always be easy. Of course, God did not call us to anything that is easy. But anything he called you to is worth it. So acknowledge your limits, seek God's guidance. Number 3 is step out in faith. James tells us very well, and he reminds us that faith without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. And once you've sought God's guidance, take action. Let's put legs to it. Let's step out in faith. You know, when the disciples were caught up in that storm in the middle of the sea, when that early morning they saw Jesus walking on the sea towards them, they panicked. They thought he was a ghost. 12 disciples in a boat, but one out of the 12 decided to do something different. He decided to act on his faith. He asked Jesus for an invitation. He said, Lord, if it is you, bid me to come. The whole sentence was answered with just one what do you call it? One word, the come. He took that one word added faith to it, and he stepped out of the boat, a place of comfort, a place of safety at the moment, into a sea that was raging, boisterous, stormy. And he started walking on the sea. He's the only one recorded in the Bible amongst the disciples that did what his master did, because he acted in faith. You know, it may feel uncomfortable or even scary, but remember that growth happens outside of your comfort zone. Growth happens outside of your comfort zone. So acknowledge your limits, seek God's guidance, step out in faith, and it goes further to say that embrace challenges. Embrace challenges. You know, challenges are not meant to break you, but to build you. Challenges strengthens you. It makes you tough. And they are not meant to break you. You know. And when we look at Romans 3, Romans 5, and the verse 3, it says, and not only that, but we glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. Embracing challenges that comes your way makes you, it strengthens you. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's embrace the challenges. You know, God will not always save you from getting into a situation, but most of the time he will save you in the situation. When I look at the life of the 3 Hebrew boys, he could have delivered them from getting into the fire, but he chose to deliver them from the fire. They were thrown into the fire, all right, but he chose to. So there are times and moments that God would deliver you in the situation, in the midst of those challenges, those difficult and hard situations. And we know that these things, these challenges, these difficult moments, and of course, God will not allow you to go through anything that you're not ready for. Anything he allows you to go through, he knows you're capable of handling it. He grants you the grace to go through it in order to get to it. He doesn't put it there to get you stuck in there, but it's a process. He takes you through it. So embrace the challenges that comes your way, and knowing that they are shaping you into who God created you to be and who God has made you to be. And number 5 is lean on your community. Lean on community. You know, when God said to Adam, it is not good for a man to be alone, he was talking about relationships. He was talking about relationships. Thank you, Sandra. Congratulations. Greater heights ahead for you. Yes. I trust you and the family are doing amazing. God was talking about relationships. You know, we mostly hear that scripture during marriage ceremonies or wedding ceremonies and all that. But God was talking about relationships. Nobody was created to be an island. We're all created to fellowship with one another. Because no matter what, there's something that somebody has that you don't have that they can offer to make your life better. It's the same way there's something that you may have or you have that somebody doesn't have that you can offer that person to make that person's life better. Everybody needs somebody. Everybody needs somebody. You know, I read a story about this gentleman. I mean, he's super rich, and he said because he could afford anything and everything, he didn't need anything from anyone. I mean, this was a super rich gentleman. He shared his own testimony. He shared his own story. And he said there was one evening he was getting ready to attend a dinner at the White House, and just as he was dressing up, he put on his tuxedo, and one of the buttons fell off. That time of the night, there wasn't any store that was open that he could go in and purchase another one. He said, I have the money. I can buy anything I want at any given time. But at that particular moment, where is he going to get a tuxedo to buy? And he had, it was almost time for him to be this what do you call it, reception at the White House. So one of his housekeepers, one of the maids, saw him, and she could tell that the gentleman wasn't in a good spirit. So she approached him and said, "Is everything okay?" He said, "Well, I've always said I don't need anything from anyone. I have all the money I have. I can purchase anything that I want, but I just lost one of the buttons on my tuxedo, and at this moment, I don't know which store is open where I can go get one." So the lady said, "Hand it over to me. I'll fix it for you." So she took the tuxedo, she took the jacket, went to her room, sewed the button back, and handed it over to him. And he said that was what changed him that day. That was what changed him. He said, it doesn't matter what you might have all the money in the world, but you still need people. We all need somebody. Everybody needs somebody. You know, in Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 9 and 10, it says that two are better than one because they have good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. So don't try to stretch you beyond your limits alone. You don't have to do that. In fact, there's an African proverb that says that if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. That's an African proverb. Says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So ladies and gentlemen, let's surround ourselves with a supportive community. This supportive community that can encourage you, that can pray for you, pray with you, and hold you accountable as you pursue your goals. You know, gradually we are getting to a place where accountability is being erased. Oh no, people don't want to be held accountable anymore. Now it's getting so challenging holding people accountable. But if we want to go far, we have to embrace all this. So I encourage you, let's find a community that will pray for you, pray with you, a community that will hold you accountable, and a community that will press you and push you to fulfill and pursue your goals. So number 4. just hit a button that was not supposed to. I believe he also wants to embrace the community, you know. All right, so number 4 is the role of resilience. You know, I realize this word resilience has appeared in almost the last 4 or 5 episodes. And yeah, and resilience is stretching yourself or the ability to bounce back from setbacks and keep you moving forward. Let's stretch ourselves beyond the limits that requires resilience. You know, resilience is rooted in our trust in God's faithfulness. In Isaiah chapter 40 and the verse 31, which says that, but those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. You know, God in his infinite wisdom likens you to an eagle, the king of the air. You know, the eagle is one of the few birds, or one of, that is never afraid of storms. When storms are coming and all birds are racing to go into hiding, the eagle is happy soaring through the storms. It says that, but those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. So it tells you and I that we have to depend on God. Now, when we face obstacles, ladies and gentlemen, it is easy to feel discouraged. Yes, it is easy to feel tempted. Yes, it is easy to retreat, and sometimes we go back. We call ourselves back into the comfort zone. But resilience calls us to press on, no matter how challenging, how difficult the situation may be. It brings us to a place of trusting that God will provide the strength we need. God will provide the strength we need to overcome. So let's consider the again. Let's consider the story of Joseph. In Genesis chapter 37. Joseph was a teenage boy. He had a dream. He told the dream to his brothers. Oh, thank you, George. Oh, thank you for joining. And Joseph faced numerous challenges. He faced betrayal from his brothers. He faced slavery. He faced false accusation. You name it. He faced imprisonment. Yet through it all, he remained resilient, trusting that God had a purpose for his life and that his dream was going to be fulfilled. You know, that is why he never stopped serving his purpose. In the prison, when he was thrown in prison, he still served his purpose. I would have said that, hey, if this thing has landed me here, the dream thing has landed me here, why do I have to keep on doing the dream thing? But he did it. In spite of all that he faced, I mean, betrayal from his own brothers, the hatred, and all that, being sold into slavery, being falsely accused of attempted rape, and being thrown into prison, he still kept his faith and served his purpose. In the end, Joseph rose to a position of great authority in Egypt, using his influence to save many lives, including his family. You know, when I look at Joseph's story, it teaches us that resilience is not just about enduring hardship, it's also about trusting in God's sovereign plan and continue to move forward when the road seems to be difficult or challenging. Number 5 is personal reflection. Personal reflection. Okay, please bear with me. Okay. All right. Good evening, Nana. Trust you're doing amazing and well as well. So number 5 is personal reflection and application. And as we near the end of our time together tonight, I want to encourage that you set time apart, take a moment, and reflect on your life. I see this as something that we don't do quite often. And look at, where do I feel limited? Where do I give all kinds of excuses on what God wants you to do? What areas in your life is God calling you to stretch beyond your current capacity? You know, let me say this. In fact, starting this podcast was something I had always wanted to do. And of course, I'm a very shy person. And being before a camera is something that sometimes I prefer being behind the scenes, but it took me quite a while until one day I said, no, I have to do this. And of course, putting out the content alone comes with it takes a lot, you know. But I realized that doing this can be a blessing, even not to the masses, at least one person. And that is the most important thing. When you look at the life of Jesus, there were times that he spoke to the multitude. There were times that he had to do one-on-one with others. He would break away from the crowd and have an encounter with at least one person. So doing this is actually stretching me beyond my limits. You know, which I love to do. And so let's get to the place where we can take moments and reflect on ourselves. Where do we feel limited? What areas in my life is God calling me to stretch beyond my current capacity? Let's take some time this week to pray and seek God's guidance. You know, ask Him to reveal the areas where He wants you to grow and to give you the courage to step out in faith. You know, one of the things I'll say is, let's remember, stretching yourself beyond your limits is not about striving in your own strength. It's about trusting in God and trusting in the power and in God's power to work through you. We want to depend on Him. You know, in Ephesians chapter 3, Ephesians chapter 3, let me give you this last scripture, which says that now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. Once you receive Christ as your Lord and personal Savior, there's an inherent power of God that resides on the inside of you. Yes, I'm a really shy person. All right, so Paul was telling the church of Ephesus, he says, now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. So it is only God who knows your thoughts. All right? It is only God who knows your thoughts. And he does all these incredible things for you because of the inherent power that resides on the inside of you. So it's according to the power that works in you, in us. So God has placed an incredible potential within you, ladies and gentlemen. Every one of you, every one of us has an incredible potential. You know, it was Dr. Miles Monroe, the late Dr. Miles Monroe, who said that the richest place on this earth is not the gold fields of South Africa or the oil fields in the Saudi Arabias or the Middle East, but it is in the cemetery. This is where people with potential went down 6 feet, buried their dreams, buried the business that we're supposed to start, buried the song that they were supposed to sing to be a blessing unto many, buried the books that they're supposed to write to be a blessing. I mean, people have left this world burying everything that could have made them a blessing to at least one person. So God has placed in you an incredible potential, and it lies within you. And he is ready to do more through you than you could ever imagine. Let's throw ourselves this challenge and ask, will you step out in faith and allow God to stretch you beyond your limits? And let's watch the space. All right, so again, thank you so much for joining me tonight in episode 74 of my Step Out, Step In podcast on the topic Stretching Beyond Your Limits. And just before we sign off, let me do this real quick. Don't forget, every Tuesday on the Ambassador of Hope, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube, the Ambassador of Hope. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. I mean, these teachings are epic. If it's worth hearing, it is worth sharing. You can go to the YouTube page. All the videos out there. Please listen, take notes, make notes, share, and let's all do this together. And you know, it's all there. Last week, he's dealing, Dr. Franco Foshopi is dealing with the law. He says the law is the law. And it's amazing. Please go, just go in there, listen to all that is on there, make notes. And you can, you know, one of the things I like about him is anything he puts out there, he tells you, use it. I mean, go in there and use it for yourself. I mean, you know, all right. And I also want to personally invite you, if you're looking for a family-oriented, Bible-believing church, I want to personally invite you. We currently meet at ANC Banquet Hall on Sundays at 9:30. The address is 12596 Darby Brook Court in Woodbridge, Virginia, 22192. If you're out of state and you have friends that is within the Woodbridge, Stafford, Quantico, Dumfries area looking for a church, please send them over. I can wait to see them and to meet them. All right. So again and again, thank you so much for joining me tonight, or what if you happen to watch the replay. And this is episode 74 of my Step Out, Step In podcast. I hope you feel very encouraged. God bless you also, Sandy. And if you feel encouraged and inspired to stretch beyond your limits, trusting in God's guidance and God's strength, let's remember that we all have to understand our limits. And we have to look at the biblical examples. You know, everything that is written in the Bible is to help you and I. Let's look at these biblical examples and stretch ourselves beyond our limits. Let's take all the practical steps to stretch ourselves beyond the limits. You know, after we've done everything, let's put legs to it. After we prayed, fasted, let's put legs to it. Take all the practical steps to stretch ourselves beyond our limits. Let's allow resilience to play a role in our lives. That no matter where you are, no matter where you've been, you might be at the lowest point of your life, you can always bounce back depending on God's strength. As you depend on God's strength, you can always bounce back. So let resilience play a role in your life. And always take a moment for personal reflection. And I believe this has blessed you. And again, thank you so much for joining. And if this episode resonates with you, I would love to hear from you. I would like to hear your thoughts. Please send it in. I always thank God for, okay. I also always thank God for your life and the entire family. Nana is in London and 5 hours ahead of us, and she's always here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I mean, this alone encourages me to do what I'm doing now. So don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, remember, God has more for you than you could ever imagine or think. Step out in faith, ladies and gentlemen, and step into his promises and watch as he takes you beyond your limits. I say that, God bless you. God bless you so much. And again, thank you, every one of you, for allowing me into your homes, into your cars, wherever you're watching it from, wherever you might be watching the replay. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed. Like me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and follow me as well. And let's share, and let me hear your comments. Let me read your comments. And until same time next week, God bless you. And this has been your host, David Joe. And again, I say to you all, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. God bless you. Have a wonderful, amazing, fruitful day to those in the United States. Happy Labor Day. And let's stretch ourselves beyond the limit. See you.